Is this on? Perfect. Good evening, everybody. The Newton Planning Board would like to hold a public meeting on Tuesday, September 12th, 2023 at approximately 7 p.m. at the Newton Town Hall. First order of business is I would like to salute the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So we have Ms. White on Zoom and Ms. Burke as well?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is he echoing?
I think so.
Yes. Can you talk for a second, Jim?
Jim, can you mute?
Or mute your computer. Perfect. And I think we're at capacity, correct? Yeah, for members. We don't need to vote anybody in. Okay, so
recording in progress.
First order of business tonight is a public hearing for 125 Development New Hampshire Corporation requests a public hearing for a 44-unit residential development in private roadway for their land off Puzzle Lane in Newton, New Hampshire. The properties are referenced as Tax Map 14, Block 1, Lots 1-1, 2, and 27-3. Jen, do you have anything to add?
Yep, just in general, I do think that the application is technically complete because all of the boxes that are required have been checked. I do think there are a lot of details and additional information that are necessary, but I think it would benefit the board and everyone in the room to let Barry go through the presentation and overview of the application.
Thank you.
Good evening, Chairman and members of the board. My name is Barry Geyer. I'm with Jones & Beach Engineers here for the applicant. We are here tonight for multifamily housing development associated with the Southern New Hampshire Industrial Park. It is map 14, lots 1-1 and 2, as well as lot 27-3. The intent of the project is to construct a 44-bedroom multifamily project on lots 1-1 and 2. 1-1 and 2, and to construct the remaining roadway to connect Puzzle Lane from Phase 1 to Phase 2 of the Southern New Hampshire Industrial Park. And on the plan in front of you, you can kind of see currently the Phase 2 of the project will end approximately this location, and we're going to construct what we call Puzzle Lane back all the way to the existing Phase 1 of the project. So for lots 1-1 and 2, they total up 16.5 acres in the residential A zone. The town ZBA voted in December to allow a multifamily residential development with 44 bedrooms on these two lots. So we're proposing 8 5-plex buildings and 1 4-plex building for all units to be 1 bedroom for a total of 44 bedrooms. We're going to put this on a 535-foot cul-de-sac and a 360-foot driveway which parallels Puzzle Lane. All units to be serviced by 2 community leach fields and a community water system as well. Stormwater for the multifamily development will be handled with 2 wet ponds and an infiltration basin. Project will be required to go to AOT for a AOT permit. The original site plan depicted multiple buildings located along Puzzle Lane, further south, and on lot 1-1. For those of you that were on the board when we were looking at it and with the ZBA. After public input, the applicant revised the plan to cluster the units as far from Sergeant Wood's building as possible. So we took them off of Puzzle Lane, down off of lot 1-1, and really clustered them up in this northwest corner. So for the roadway, I'm gonna flip back to that.
Would it be possible for Barry to move his plan back a little bit so the audience can see as well as the
Yeah, we
board?
have copies here, so.
Yep, good idea.
Well, I try to keep it close to the mic.
Yep,
So,
yep.
instead of jumping back and forth, but I don't know if everybody can see.
We can move the mic that way if you need it, if that would make it better.
Do you want me to
I can share.
share?
If you let me join, I can just share the screen too.
We good? So for the roadway, Puzzle Lane, as I indicated, will be constructed from the end of the cul-de-sac that was approved as part of Phase 2 to the existing Puzzle Lane located between lots 27.6 and 27.7. So the intent is to construct a 24-foot wide roadway conforming to town standards. As for drainage, we use a little bit of everything to treat the stormwater, including a bioretention or bioinfiltration basin, 2 gravel wetlands, a wet pond, and what are called ditch turnouts. We designed the road to minimize wetland impacts by crossing at the narrowest point where the wetlands are the narrowest. But the completed project does require 6,388 square feet of wetland impact and just under 60,000 square feet of wetland buffer impact. We have received comment letters from the town engineer, Mr. Vignali, and the RPC planner, Ms. Rowden. Although there are some items that need to be resolved, we don't see any stumbling blocks. We do understand the project will require approval by Plastow as well due to the railway construction. We haven't submitted to them yet, but we will be submitting to them in the near future. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions the board has.
Thank you.
Would you like me to kind of hit on the high points of my comments?
Sure, why don't we start with that? Unless somebody from the board has a comment or questions before that.
I just was curious to know, in terms of the wetland portions that are going to be impacted, has there been any studies to see and make sure there weren't any endangered species living in that area, such as box turtles, wood turtles, or blanding turtles?
So we are in contact with Fish and Game regarding this, and we are providing the information that they requested. We have done wildlife assessment. Our wetland scientist has been out there and flagged these, and the Fish and Game has looked at it. There are endangered species in the area. Obviously, we don't know that they're on the site, but we are going to be providing fishing game, or we are going to be providing some area in a conservation easement. Actually, this is associated with Phase 2 of the last
Recording
project.
stopped.
What was that? We are going to be providing a conservation easement associated with Phase 2 of the last
Recording in progress.
project to for turtle habitat. Does that answer your question? Oh, sorry.
Oh. Rain, are you muted or we're having problems on our end? Did you hear that?
I'm not muted. I'm not muted.
Nope, there we go.
Okay, we heard you that time.
Okay, yeah, I don't know what happened halfway through your answer. The audio on Zoom cut out and then it crashed. So I'm not
So
sure.
I'll give you the highlights. So we are working with Fish and Game. They have been in consultation regarding the wetlands, or not just the wetlands, but endangered species on the property.
Okay.
So we're going to follow their recommendations. We are providing, as part of Phase 2 of the prior project, we're going to be providing some conservation area for turtle habitat.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Ready for me?
Where do we stand with the state as far as the new entranceway to the road coming in through Plastow, please?
So we're still working with DOT on that. We have received comments from them. We had to provide some additional survey that took a little while to get in, but we have resubmitted to them, and hopefully we'll get approval soon. We've answered the questions that they had. It's just a matter of them reviewing it and seeing if they like the answers we gave.
So sort of along those lines, one of my big comments for the board is really understanding the future considerations of this proposal. You saw a preview of the loop road on prior plans that have come through the planning board, but this is to actually propose building the road. So the future development potential is certainly part of your consideration, not just the 44 units that are being proposed. The plan is predicated on being able to use the private access way that comes off of Puzzle Lane, the cul-de-sac, which is a town road. So there were some comments from the town engineer about that private access way and making sure it's adequate, which I think Barry is intending to supply some additional information. The loop road coming off for the residential development that's proposed, and then coming back through the larger lot to connect with the four conditionally approved industrial buildings to connect then ultimately down back to 108. That is a very big road and opens up a lot of potential future development. So just that needs to be part of your considerations as to how that will be impacted and the construction of that road with that potential future development. Everything's being proposed to be to town standard and maintain it as a private way. Is that
Correct.
okay? The multifamily use did get a variance last December. They were awarded or got a variance to do 44 bedrooms. That was what the variance was granted between two lots. This proposal is 44 one-bedroom units. So they will have, if this is approved and constructed, will have exhausted that variance at that point. No more bedrooms could be built on the second lot as far as a multifamily development without an additional variance. So just to make sure that's clear as far as sort of how things could play out. Plastow would have to have approval. Plastow may have some considerations if the future development and how that may play into emergency services, but it does have to get approval from Plastow. Again, the roadway and some of those comments are probably the biggest comments. The site plan for the multifamily is a big consideration, but that future development is probably the biggest issue for this plan. Going through septic design, again, they gave the locations, but the amount of septic capacity between those is important. That's why I've recommended that you require additional information, because I need to know if that triggers the need for a hydrogeologic study. Without that information, I can't tell you if it triggers your own regulation. Stormwater, they have submitted a drainage plan. It generally seems to be in compliance. There are some notes related to inspections, maintenance, operations that do need to be added. You would certainly want to have those as a condition of any approval. There are a number of miscellaneous items. Some of them are just notes noting what setbacks and boundaries are in the plan set, proposed structures, giving the elevations. I think someone had a question of if the architectural design information was supplied. It was at the very back of the application, but it doesn't give first floor elevations. It doesn't give structure ultimate elevations. They're one-story buildings. They are likely to be in compliance, but again, information that you're requiring. There is no real landscaping proposed other than to just show existing tree lines and proposed tree lines. It seems fairly well buffered from the neighboring residential properties, just sheer by distance, but there's no landscaping to buffer the potential tenants of the proposed dwellings from that industrial use, which that is the only access way in and out. The lighting doesn't seem to include any lighting on the building. It only has a couple of street lights. Snow storage, there's a few areas where you may want to have the snow storage pulled out of the wetland buffer. There's some issues with a dumpster also being where the snow storage is going to be. It's a lot of those types of smaller items that I think really need to be cleaned up that are outside of the road issue, which is probably, again, the largest consideration and item that needs to be worked on. So that's my big highlight.
Yeah, and as to the hydrogeological study, we will require it.
Okay.
So although I haven't ordered it yet, it will be coming.
Okay.
Is there any consideration for like a dry hydrant or a cistern there for the fire department, since it's so far?
We're not
in there?
proposing anything. That's kind of up to the fire department to request if they would ask, if they want something like that.
So I will recommend that effectively all of your department heads, at least you seek comment from them, fire chief being a big one. The other aspect is from the road agent or the select board, how the impact on the construction and the potential future development may impact the town-owned Puzzle Lane. The state will take care of it with the connection onto the state road, but any impact that, it may be perfectly adequate, but that's why some more information is needed.
I might have missed it on the drawing, but are these sprinklered?
Yes, they are.
Barbara, do you have any comments?
Not right now, thank you.
Okay. So is the proposal to treat this separate from phase 2?
This is phase, well, we call it phase 5, but yes, it's the residential component of it.
Okay,
So it is separate from phase 2.
If phase 2 is not constructed,
Well, we have to construct enough to get Puzzle Lane to where we are now. But I guess if, plain devil's advocate, if the applicant decided not to construct the 4 commercial buildings, then we would come back in to amend any approval that the board may give on the current phase for the construction of the road to Puzzle Lane. Does that make sense?
So a big clarification that needs to be made is the private access way, whatever component of it you're talking about, needs a different name than the public Puzzle Lane.
Yes.
that was a clarification point, but
That's a clarification, but Barry's correct that they would have to change what they have proposed tonight in order to construct it if they don't build the conditionally approved for industrial buildings off of 108.
I will tell you that there's actually still buildings laying on the ground ready to be constructed as part of phase 2. So the chances of that not being constructed are 0. As soon as we get permission to, they have equipment ready to go.
so the drainage, now that you made that comment, the drainage plans that are in this packet for phase 2 have been updated,
Correct.
fresh AOT.
Yeah, and we've been working with AOT because it's a whole system, right? So we had to look at everything
Right,
regarding
you're
that.
segmenting, or based on the information that I have in front of us, it appears that this may or may not have been segmented from the state level review.
No, this is part of the overall that was approved. And I'll double check on that to ensure that it was. But this has to be approved as an amended AOT as part of the phase
that-
2 package.
That's, yes. I'll just leave it at that. Do you have any comments on that? Or
Just that, yeah, because this is owned by the same applicant, it's in part the same property, both the conditionally approved site plan and this proposal would have to go through AOT. It would be an amended AOT application.
And the board has not seen the updated drawings for phase 2. I'm just putting that on the record.
Correct.
So those have not been approved.
They have not, they've been conditionally approved, not final approved. We're waiting for DOT and,
The town of Newton has not approved anything for phase 2,
well, you conditionally approved it.
Yes.
and they have been revised.
Correct. Which occurs on every project that's conditionally approved, that there are some degree of changes that happen when negotiation with DOT or with AOT or any other state and any of the other permits that you may have conditionally approved.
I would really like to see clarification on that.
Don't
Based-
documents come back before final approval with all these changes?
Absolutely.
Yep. So if
We will see them before obviously the chairman has to sign them and saying that these are approved. And we have to meet the conditions that were established part of phase 2, which are that we get an AOT permit, or 2 of them, the big ones are the AOT permit and the DOT permit, which we're working on both of those. Now, both of those state agencies have asked for revisions that don't negatively impact the project as it was approved by the board. actually
I
make
would like
improvements.
to clarify that that's your opinion.
Okay,
That's a broad statement.
okay.
If there are, I'll say, minor amendments that don't, then it is very possible that any alteration that has been caused because of getting state permits to that conditional approval may never need to come back before the planning board. If there are more significant changes, it may have a need to come back to the planning board.
And
I don't know what they are, so I can't comment one way or the other, but
And I would
Depends.
like to reiterate that. From the board's perspective or the town's perspective, it's not the applicant's determination whether it's to the benefit of the town, regardless of what AOT, DES, anybody says.
Okay, I'm not arguing the point.
Okay. Just setting that very clear in the record, that it's not the applicant's determination whether a change is minor or not. I think it should be the board's decision to
No,
make that opinion.
yeah, we submit the final plans with all the changes back to the town for approval. And if the board decides that it needs to come back to the planning board to review, then that's on the board's
Correct.
decision. Yeah. I think we're on the same page. I don't,
It was the statement that it was beneficial to the project.
I guess it's a matter of opinion. And we agree to that.
Thank you. It's just not your opinion to make. And there may be, I have no idea what the changes were because we weren't provided the opportunity to look at them. I know based on the amount of comments that, in my opinion, I would consider them potentially significant.
Okay. You will have the opportunity to review them.
Mr. Chair, this is Barbara, I'm sorry. When we get to the point of looking at, about the buildings, I do have a question at that time, okay?
Okay, sure. Sorry to
Thank you.
just to get back on topic because I'm digressing off. For your phase 5 application, if the private roadway is not developed, I'll just call it the private roadway, all traffic will be diverted to the public puzzle lane.
Well, the proposal is to construct a private roadway, so.
I
that's-
understand that, but if
So
I
it's a
can't-
it's a different project without Puzzle Lane connecting.
I can't approve or opine on a project or provide my opinion on a theoretical road that's not being built that was previously approved.
so if you were to conditionally approve what has been proposed tonight, or give any sort of approval, if the private roadway off of 108 was never constructed, this project can never be constructed without coming back. They would effectively have to do a completely different proposal where the 44 units are going. It would have a little dead end or something to that effect. It would be a completely different application than you have before you. So this application can't go forward unless the other conditionally approved application gets a final approval and the roadway at minimum is constructed.
First.
Yes.
Thank you. We all get that?
The entire roadway, right?
The roadway that is conditionally approved off of 108, which does sort of dead end right past the gas easement,
Yeah.
if that is not constructed, then this proposal you have before you tonight could never be constructed.
Yeah,
Even if you approved it, it could not be
the site plan would be
constructed.
null and void because it wouldn't meet the requirements. The road wouldn't be there to connect to. It's a whole different animal without that.
So then that would null and void the other project that he has sitting on the ground too, being ready to be put together.
That would have not, well, obviously, we'd have to construct the road to access phase 2.
That's what I'm
Right.
saying.
Yeah.
Yes.
And if phase 2 changes, if the buildings are not constructed, potentially the traffic study would be revised.
If phase 2 were not constructed.
The buildings
The
on phase
buildings.
If the buildings were never built, but the road was constructed, you would have effectively just overbuilt the road. So while that's not ideal, it's not really a detriment to anything to have overbuilt the road. If they choose to never build all of the buildings or only choose to build one of the buildings.
Right, but if DOT said required a turning lane, that may be modified potentially based on a updated traffic study for these additional residential units.
I think because of the order that they have to get the approval, it doesn't matter.
Okay. I'm just talking about the current comments from DOT.
Yes. The current comments from DOT on the 4 industrial sites will have to get amended based on what is being proposed, which is somewhere around 200 trips, regular vehicle trips. So that will have to be proposed, but DOT will take into consideration the future build-out of potential of this site when doing any sort of an amended connection to 108.
Okay. Barbara, I'm going to switch it to you because I got to think for a few minutes. If you have questions on the buildings.
Okay, okay, I just had a question on the 5-unit buildings that I understand that the center one is supposed to be for handicap, and I am questioning the egress from a handicap building in the back to just be a window. That seems like it's not what it needs to be for handicapped access, you know, egress.
So we will double check on that, but it's our understanding it's a breakaway window that is allowable for that type of egress. But we will double check and have that information for you at the next meeting.
Okay, my concern is the fact that, I mean, my husband's in a wheelchair. There's no way he could get out of just a window, breakaway or not. So that's why I have a concern.
Yeah, we believe it meets code, but we'll double check on that, Barbara.
Thank you very much.
Is there anything else you, from the state that you're waiting on, Barry?
Well, we'll have to go back to AOT for this phase, as well as we are going to have subsurface for all the septic systems and the water system. So we will, I mean, we haven't submitted those. We typically come to the board before in case there's any major changes that have to occur. For phase 2, we're waiting on the AOT and the DOT. That's it. AOT has reviewed, we've resubmitted to meet their requirements, and we are currently waiting on, well, we just received comments from Fish and Game, which Fish and Game now has input on every project that AOT reviews. So Fish and Game has asked for a conservation area for the turtles habitat. So we're going to provide that. We'll have to write up an easement and show them where it's at. But other than that, that's the only thing that AOT is waiting on.
Okay.
I have a question. I'd like to get back. So these are emergency egress windows?
That is my understanding. I'm not an architect, and I
okay.
apologize. But if you ask the question, I can get you the answer.
Yeah,
by
so
the
it looks
next
like
meeting.
they probably break away outward, so we have to worry about like snow drifts and stuff. So I would think there'd be a ramp there that would be shown in somewhere in a drawing. And then in the front, it seems like we're missing some details as far as ramps go, and am I to believe there's no overhangs over any of the front doors?
I will look into that. The ramps was part of the town engineer's comments as well, so we'll address those in our next submittal.
And then the middle one is ADA. How many ADAs are there?
one per building. We have 9 buildings.
So I think
Or
you're supposed
it'd
to
be
have
8.
three, 3-0 openings between all your, yeah.
Fully meet ADA.
Yeah, it's not in the drawing, but anyway, I know it's easily changed, but,
We can provide a full set of drawings. that
yeah.
shows it.
Just to clarify, one of the buildings is a fourplex. Is that also proposed to have an ADA unit?
Yes.
Okay.
And your drainage analysis and AOT submission, I understand you haven't done it yet. That will address the historic activities that have been occurring on the sites?
Yeah, that was one of the big hiccups that we ran into along the way is AOT is making us go back and get an after-the-fact permit for the activities that occurred previously and are still occurring. So we had to go back out, do additional survey, do additional drainage, and have worked all that up. But yes, that's part of the whole package. The AOT package from Phase 2 will be updated with the Phase 5 improvements and submitted as well to AOT. So it'll include all those changes. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does, thank you. I'm just trying to limit the potential back and forth so we don't have a drainage plan that needs to be revised, that we looked at, that then got commented on at AOT to correct that, so that we now have something that is significantly different than what the planning board approved. Or had no comment from the town. Can we open this up to public comment, or do we have to take jurisdiction?
So you can certainly open it up to public comments. The difficult part is that if you don't take jurisdiction, then really the comments become not fully part of your consideration for deliberation. But you do have a number of folks here, so it might be a good opportunity for them to at least ask questions.
So from a procedural standpoint, if somebody said they don't like that the buildings are red, I'm just picking something that's totally frivolous, and then they came back and they changed them to blue, that individual in the audience could say, I really appreciate the applicant for changing the color, even though that comment, we may not be able to consider it, but we can actually consider it. Did that make any sense?
You can,
If they
you can
previous, or come in the future when we do, if and when we do take jurisdiction?
You can consider it in context. That's a really specific example.
Yeah.
You do have a lot of folks here, so it does probably benefit the applicant and the board to hear from them. I do think there are, like I said, technically it's a complete application. Checks the boxes. I would not recommend you do any approval of it based on its current state. But then it does start the 65-day clock, which is sort of crunches everybody time-wise as well. But
When do you think you're going to be able to get the hydro study done, hydrogeo study?
Oh, well, it won't be immediately. We're talking at least 3 weeks.
Jim?
You can take jurisdiction, just remember that as soon as you do, it starts the 65-day clock towards.
Well, with that being said, and there's a lot going back and forth here, and I really don't want this to go on like other instances that have come before the board, and I'm not gonna say which ones or whatever. I am gonna make a motion that we do not accept jurisdiction of this due to the fact that there's too much information that's out there that needs to be addressed on this, so that we can have the proper information in place on the plans and from other state agencies and whatever before we make these decisions and take jurisdiction of it.
So if you make that motion for this application to continue, the applicant has to request a continuance, or else you're effectively forced to deny it as incomplete. And that's up to them, if they want to request a continuance or not.
Well, the board hasn't voted on the,
Right, I understand that.
So I made the motion. Does anybody want to second that?
I'll second that.
Just to clarify, Bob, you're making a motion to continue
Without taking jurisdiction.
pending further
Information.
information by the applicant?
Yes.
So you can't force the continuance, you can just make a motion to not take jurisdiction.
Right.
But if they do, if that is how the vote stands, if they do not request a continuance, your only option is to either accept jurisdiction or deny the application as incomplete. Those are your two options.
Yep.
Okay.
So the motion is not to take jurisdiction. And Jim seconded that?
Okay,
May I call the question?
yes, please.
Ms. White?
I'm not sure how I want to vote on this. I have to think about this for a minute.
I'll come back to you. Mr. Eddy?
Aye.
Mr. Marshon?
Aye.
Ms. Burke?
Aye.
Ms. Eddy?
Aye.
Mr. Ryan?
Aye.
Ms. White?
Aye.
Mr. Moran?
Am I the last one to vote? I will say aye, but not with prejudice, just for seeking additional clarification and information so the board, or so I personally, not speak for the board, can make a decision.
so we will ask for a continuance to the next available meeting.
Thank you.
Do you want to do we have to pick a date, understanding that everybody's really busy and you're working to get the hydro study, which is additional, I'll say, feather in your cap to help move
Yeah,
this
and
forward. Is it 2 weeks or do you want 4 weeks? So
Oh, 4 weeks.
And just so it's
October
understood,
10th.
the reason why I did that is so that we don't end up a year from now trying to get all this information together and doing a continuance, and
Absolutely.
that's the whole idea.
Sometimes it
behind
takes a conversation.
That's what I'm saying. So we've got some of the facts, let's get the rest of the facts, let's get everything else in place, and then we can,
Absolutely.
10-10, Barry.
10-10.
With that being said, I would like to open this up to for public comment, just so the applicant can hear any concerns or comments from the public. That way they could potentially make some changes before coming in front of the board again. And if I would ask that you state your name for the record, please, if any individual comes up, and try to limit it to a couple minutes.
Name and address.
Oh, and address, sorry.
Okay. It's Keith Gibbons, 15 Evergreen Drive, Newton, Hampshire. And I'm the president of the board of Sergeant Woods. And I just wanted to say that after the Newton zoning board approved the building of 44 bedrooms by 125 development, the Sergeant Woods Board of Directors was made aware of a second site plan for the buildings that were proposed on the parcels that are presented here tonight. On December 14th, 2022, Roger Hamill, the former president of Sergeant Woods, and I met with our attorney and discussed this alternative location preference with him. He contacted the attorney for 125 development in regards to our preference for this proposed site. The site plan that is presented tonight at this meeting is the one that the board of directors requested to be used. Therefore, the board of directors representing the Sergeant Woods Condo Association does not object to the building locations as shown on this plan. We would like to stress that maintaining as much natural landscaping and as possible and limiting the outside lighting output would be a concern for the residents as well. I would also like to note that we want to make sure that both lots are maintained together, so there's no future development of the area that was talked about before. And again, our approval is limited to the building placement on the partials, and there may be individual homeowners who wish their opinion, as they are free to do so. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gibbons.
Ms. Rada, I just have a question based on Mr. Gibbons' comment. Is there a regulatory pathway to stop a subdivision once there's a variance approved by the ZBA?
So the variance that was given for these two lots together limits it to 44 bedrooms. That's what's being proposed. This is in the residential A district, so in theory, without any additional zoning relief, you could put a single-family residence on the lot that's not being proposed to be built upon, because that wouldn't have required a variance. Mm-hmm. But anything additional would require further zoning relief.
Okay, thank you. I was just kind of curious on that myself. Mr. Hamill?
Roger Hamill, 17 Spruce Lane. I have a few questions through the chair to the developer. The first one was when he appeared before the zoning board, he made it clear that they planned on merging the two residential lots. Is there still a plan to do a lot merger of those two lots? And that would then, if they officially did a lot merger, that would then clear up that issue. And either that or the board, as a condition, because of the way that the variance was issued, could require them to do a lot merger. The other thing is a question that I have, and this guy sort of, I think, alluded to it, that they haven't done a study yet on the water supply. My sort of concern is you've got 44 bedrooms, and the wells and their well radius is all on their land, and Sergeant Woods' wells are in the same general area, again, with their well radius all on their land, but would be interested in their comments on, the adequacy of the water supply and any effect of supplying water for 44 additional bedrooms would have on the water supply in the area. That's sort of a question that I think should be addressed at some point. The other one is, as Ms. Rowden mentioned, the buffering between where the buildings are proposed and Sergeant Woods is significant. There's a relatively large amount of woods both on their side of the lot line and on Sergeant Woods' lot line. My question is if they stand where the buildings are proposed now, can they see Sergeant Woods? I don't think they could, but that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger.
Jen had a clarifying
Just
point.
to address the water supply issue, this will be required to be a public water supply through DES administrative rules, and a significant part of that process is ensuring that there is adequate supply that wouldn't impact the neighboring public water supplies like Sergeant Woods. So that is not required to technically be submitted for your regulations, but a condition of any approval should certainly be that they get DES approval for a public water supply. That kind of goes with your catch-all requirement of all state permits, but.
Barry, do you want to address those now, or do you want to just continue it with?
If you don't have any other public,
You had the ZBA merge. I think Jen addressed the well permitting, drawdown testing, and then the buffer, the substantial buffer between.
yeah, our intent is to merge the two lots. The ZBA, the approval was 44 bedrooms on those two lots. So there's nothing that we were proposing to do in addition to, or that we could do in addition to. We will be doing a hydrological study, which is for the septic systems. As Jen said, that we will have to do a pumping test for the water system to ensure that there's adequate water and that it doesn't impact the abutting water. We don't believe that there will be any issues, but you never know. That's why we do the test. And that's all covered by, in DES, and we'll be drilling out there in the near future.
And then visually,
I haven't walked
it's
it.
a couple hundred feet.
Yeah, my understanding is from people that have is that you can't see them. And, we did move everything originally, for those of you that weren't with us when we went through the whole ZBA and the phase 2 process, the buildings were spread out along lots 1-1 and lot 2 to be more spread out, and they were more on the south end. After we heard from the Sergeant Wood abutters, the applicant decided to relocate as many as he could, which is all of them, up to the northwest corner, so that the visual impact to Sergeant Woods and the impacts to Sergeant Woods would be mitigated or reduced.
Jen, did you?
Just, if at some point you get to accepting jurisdiction, you can certainly do a site walk,
Okay.
if the board feels that would be helpful.
And I have one more clarification, and I know you brought this up. These are all one bedroom units, so they're, I'll say, workforce housing. No,
They're
Don't say that
they're
word.
not workforce housing.
or they potentially could be classified for that. And there's a whole stipulation or stigma with that, and maybe
Yeah.
it's something we could talk about later, not directly into your application, but the differences between what the perceived public is.
They may be more affordable units simply based on their size.
The intent is for them to be working class
Thank you.
units. We are approved for 44 bedrooms for the ZBA. We chose to go 44 bedrooms and 1-bedroom units.
So, yeah, I'll leave it at that. If you want to elaborate on the pros and cons of that, feel free.
Mr. Alberti on Zoom has raised his hand.
Sure. If you want to speak, Tom, Mr. Alberti?
Yeah, can you hear me?
We can perfectly, thank you.
Great, thank you. This is Tom Alberti, a butter to Ridgewood Road in Plastow. And I just have a question about page 3 of the plan set and page 7 of the plan set, which is plans C1 and C2, specifically to the abutting property in the roadway location. One of them on page 3 on C1 shows it to the right of the Newton-Plastow town line. And on page 7, it shows the roadway entering into Plastow. So I'm not sure what is the intent and why there's a discrepancy. So number one. Number two, I did want to point out that if the intention is to be C2, which it's page 7, that land in Plastow is zoned low-density residential, not intended for a roadway. Only a home could go on that property. Of course, that would need to go in front of Plastow, but certainly doesn't meet any setback requirements or any other zoning allowed zoning uses at this time. So just want to point that out.
Jen, do you have a?
Yeah, I think the discrepancy is one is the existing conditions plan, which shows what is effectively like a logging road, and that's what's currently there. The proposed paved road that's would be proposed to be built would be shifted per this proposal to be into Plastow a little bit.
Correct. The current proposal, and we will have to go to Plastow for their approval, is to construct a small portion of the roadway within the lots associated with, that are owned by the Southern New Hampshire, or 125 Development Corp. to construct part of that road on there. And yeah, the discrepancy, as Ms. Rowden indicated, is we show the Woods Road on sheet 6 that is currently located there. It's outside of Plastow.
Okay. And again, I wanted to point out that's low density residential. It's not going to allow for a road in that capacity, certainly not to service industrial buildings in any capacity. Also, it doesn't meet the setback requirements on Newton zoning, which is 200 feet from a residential property line. So, those are just considerations that I think the board needs to understand, and I think the applicant should be looking at to resolve, other than trying to, go the challenging route, which is pretty common by the applicant, which is to try to figure out a way to get away with something that technically isn't allowed and won't be allowed.
Do you want to clarify on the setback, the yard setback, Jen? Or?
So the setbacks from residential properties, the way it's stated in Newton's regulations, are that structures have to be 200 feet from any zone that it abuts that are residential. It does not explicitly state residential in the town of Newton. So that's what Mr. Alberti is alluding to.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Alberti. Do you have any more comments?
No, thank you. I appreciate the consideration.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Public comment?
Sure. Thank you, Barry.
Robert Lavelle, 9 Hemlock Drive, Sergeant Woods. We appreciate moving the units to where they are. My question has to do with the road that's going to be constructed. That's according to the scale that I looked at. The nearest place the road goes to Cedar Drive units in Sergeant Woods is about 200 feet. And we learned that the road is going to be 24 feet wide. So I have two questions. One is the thinking that they'll preserve as much tree vegetation buffer to reduce the visual noise and light impacts for Sergeant Woods? Is that the thinking along that road? And secondly, is that road going to be built on the existing dirt road that runs behind our property there? Thank you.
Sure. I'll answer the first one for you. The planning board's going to approve the tree line that's shown on the drawings, and it's all intents and purposes as close as the road as they can get it as being shown. And it seems like they've tucked the stormwater treatment areas to the south of that road away from Sergeant Woods as currently shown. There was another question you had, and I'm totally blanking on what.
Well, the buffering of vegetation.
Oh, the buffering.
To the north of the road.
So I don't know if you want to state anything else, Barry or Tom.
Yeah, the one question was regarding the location of the road. We tried to mimic where the existing road is, because when they put these logging roads in, they typically put them in the best spots so they don't impact the wetlands. And this one happens to be basically where it is in that location adjacent to Sergeant Woods. And yes, we did try to mitigate our impact as much as possible by keeping the road to the south, say, as much as possible. And all of our stormwater treatment, to the degree possible, is going south too. So it'll keep the trees as much as possible.
Thank you.
Does anybody else from the public have comments? There's nobody else online. Jim? No more comments online? It doesn't appear that way.
Well, I just pointed it out.
Am I hearing things maybe? No? Okay. Barbara or Raina? We good?
I have no questions, thank you.
Thank you.
No questions or comments at this time.
Anybody else on the board? Going once for the public? No?
I do.
Oh, sorry.
Since it's such a concern, the buffer, maybe we should kind of put that clearly on the drawings so everybody will relax about the buffer zone. And also, I don't know, like a framing cutaway elevation drawing so we can see what the, a cutaway on the building.
Sure, we'll have those for next time. There is on C3 and some of the adjacent or additional sheets regarding the buffer, we do show a tree line.
Okay, yep.
And as the chairman indicated, that the board will hold us to the tree line.
Can you, just for clarity, put a few dimensions on there? And
Oh, absolutely.
Not just, like, they don't have to be perfect, but like, plus or minus 200 feet from a couple of the residential structures? Do you have anything else, Jen? No. So you work on getting the hydro study, some of the clarifications, and,
Yep, and we have to address, Mr. Vignali's comments as well as Ms. Rowden's.
Did we set a date for the next one?
10/10.
10/10?
So
Okay.
a month from
That
today.
has to meet,
Yep,
you need a
alright.
motion for that.
Very good.
We have to make a motion for that.
Yeah. So I'll make a motion.
To continue to October
10.
10.
That's why I was asking.
Thank you.
Emily seconded that, Jim.
Yeah, I caught it. Ms. White,
Aye.
Mr. Eddy,
Aye.
Mr. Marchand,
Aye.
Ms. Burke,
Aye.
Ms. Eddy,
Aye.
Mr. Ryan,
Aye.
Mr. Moran.
Aye.
That's unanimous.
Thank you. So we'll see you in a couple weeks, and thank you very much.
Sounds good, thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
It does.
I'm not sure if anybody else wants to take off unless you want to hear us talk about meeting minutes and expenses. Or if you could stay if you would like. There is also an update on the housing survey. Still out there? It is.
He said that, they can't get out of here fast enough.
Are we extending it? After Old
Housing
Home.
survey's still going on.
Speaking of which, did you all take that survey on the housing? The housing survey? If you haven't, please look it up on the website and do so.
It's either that or a Blandings turtle.
The town of Newton
Can I get your
proposed, it has to do,
I
bless
can't
you,
hear.
with something like the workforce housing.
It's to help us gauge,
It's,
You know she is.
it helps us gauge what's important to you.
Oh, okay. And where are you?
that? Yes,
9 Hemlock?
yep. Yeah, or on the website.
Thank you.
On the town website, you'll be able to find it. All right, thank you.
I didn't even fill mine out.
Thank you, Barry. Got it.
At 9:30 p.m. tonight, remind me to fill out.
Okay, so next on the agenda, we have 3 NPREA manifests to approve.
You have the minutes,
Oh, sorry,
and it's of 8:22, not 8:08.
I'm skipping ahead. I forgot, can I have a motion to approve the minutes from August 22nd, 23?
As stated,
Second,
Second.
nope.
Ms. White,
Aye.
Mr. Eddy,
Aye.
Mr. Marchand,
aye.
Mr. Ryan,
Aye.
Ms. Burke,
Aye.
Ms. Eddy,
Aye.
and Mr. Moran.
Aye.
That's unanimous.
Now I'm moving ahead to NPREA manifests. Can I do all 3 of these at once, or do I have to do them individual? I ask this every time.
That is up to you. You have to sign all 3 separately.
Okay, so the approval of 3 NPREA manifests, one for the amount of $3. The other one the amount of $77.78 for a closeout of the subdivision we looked at, lot line adjustment, not subdivision, lot line adjustment on Country Pond Road. And the last one is majority of the fee of the $568.24 associated with the application that was just in front of us for abutter notifications.
Motion as moved.
Maybe that wasn't
Second.
super clear, but thank you, Barbara.
Ms. White,
Aye.
Mr. Eddy,
Aye.
Mr. Marchand,
Aye.
Mr. Ryan,
Aye.
Ms. Burke,
Aye.
Ms. Eddy,
Aye.
and Mr. Moran.
Aye.
It's unanimous.
Thank you. And I lost my agenda. Next is it
Invest New Hampshire
Thank you.
update.
Ms. Rowden?
Drum roll, please.
So as I know you all know, we have the housing survey going right now, and I know all of you have taken it. Yep.
4 times.
Okay, don't do that. I'll find out about that. But have other people in your households also take it. That's fine. So the survey is still going. It is slated to technically close on Friday, but I do recommend we actually extend it by a week to allow for some advertising at Old Home Day on Saturday, because I think it's a great opportunity. If any of you are going, if Jim would be so kind to print out a couple more of the little postcards, it'd be really great to have some people willing to hand out a few little slips, if you're willing.
Sure.
I'll be
I-
Put me up.
let me know if you want them, because I'm printing out another 150 or so to give to the friendly person at the transfer station who just likes handing out little slips of paper.
And I appreciate all of his efforts. So I did send out a link earlier this week, end of last week, so you guys could see the report as it's coming in. If you happen to take a look at it, you are looking at comments as of that moment. Those comments are not currently posted online. The intent is that all comments will eventually be available for everybody to peruse. We have quite the spectrum at this point, which is great, hearing from different people's opinions on housing. There are probably a few comments in there we might want to redact a few names. Not a lot of them, but there are a few. As of right now, we have 93 people who have taken the survey. It's not huge numbers on this kind of a survey. If we've done a lot of surveys recently, which Newton has done a fair number, we're not going to get super high numbers, but it's at least enough to get, I'm going to say, the general perspective of a swath of the population. One thing we had talked about was the fact that some of our easier outreach was to those living in some of the 55 plus communities. It doesn't really seem to be overly skewing that way. I can't promise you that this is a statistically representative survey. It is not. It is a snapshot in time, but we have gotten a lot of really rich comments. I won't go through all of them, but for the most part, people do seem to feel like their current housing is actually meeting their current and projected future needs, but there's some downsizing, there's some aging in place, there's if my family expands, so there's modifications in some cases, but for the most part, people are saying yes. There is definitely concern out there about affordability. There is concern about losing the characteristics of Newton that people really like. There's concern about natural resources. Natural resource protection actually gets one of the highest priorities, especially if you combine high and medium priorities. Existing businesses, people have a lot of affinity for preserving rural character. I will caveat that with defining rural character is almost impossible. It means very different things to different people depending on sort of where you're from, what you're used to. And if you're coming from New York City, Newton is certainly very rural. If you're coming from, I don't know, Southampton, Newton's not super rural. So it just depends on your perspective.
It's a terrible phrase from a zoning perspective as well.
Yes,
Or
it
a
is.
legal perspective.
The affordability, we're getting a lot of interesting, not discrepancy. People seem to not fully understand what affordability actually means. Like, what is the number that sort of makes something affordable? And confuse it often with affordable workforce housing, with low income, very low income, Section 8 public housing. There's a lot of confusion on terms, and I do this a lot and I get confused by it. So that's a really common result. One of the things with the land use audit that I will be incorporating in, that's another task under your grant and any public outreach, is sort of a summary sheet of what do those different terms mean and what sort of income or rental or ownership threshold are we actually talking about. Affordable and workforce can be actually fairly high, not high end, but high income. It's not low income housing. It can be nurses, doctors, teachers, firefighters. It's aimed at that, although low income certainly is part of that conversation. You guys seem to be doing pretty well with provides adequate housing options for aging seniors. You're doing a little bit better than some of our other communities in Rockingham County, so props to Newton for that. That might be the one area we're seeing, I'll say, the Sergeant Woods influence a little. People don't really understand what Newton's housing goals should be. Like, there was a lot of, well, do we have any say over what the housing market is doing? And the answer to that is basically you have some say. You don't have a lot of say, but you have some say. So that's the part we're kind of talking about.
I have a question for Mr. Gibbons or Mr. Hamill. How many units are in Sergeant Woods?
115.
Thank you.
92 acres.
So
Maybe we've skewed the surveys because so many people from Sergeant Woods filled them out.
Honestly, so one of the questions is age. So that does help me to a degree sort of whittle out how different people, I haven't broken it apart yet. I will do that especially if I think that there's a strong, I'll say 55 plus influence. I think on that particular issue, it might be skewing a little bit, but I don't think overall, this is me reviewing it sort of every couple of days. I don't think it's a strong influence. So we'll keep this open. So I'll be giving the full report to you guys. I might have a couple of recommendations for some redaction of just where someone's explicitly named, but leaving the rest of the comment, or as much as the comment as we can.
Yeah.
But once the survey is completed, the general intent is to do a summary report of the survey results, pull any like major themes out of it, some of the numbers that come out of it, pulling sort of the range of comments that we heard, because a big thing with housing is being able to communicate housing stories really helps to spur action that the community can get behind as a whole. We tend to remember stories, we don't tend to remember statistics. So putting in a range of some of those comments so people can actually hear from real people and aren't just taking my word for it. And attaching the full summary report and then publishing that summary and the full results so that it basically making a splash like we did with the survey, posting it on the town website, posting its availability on social media, anybody that subscribed getting a notification, it is now available. So the goal would be to do that basically within 2 or 3 weeks after we wrap up the survey. And then we'll continue working on the master plan. This is part of the outreach and education for working on that master plan work. So that's what I have for this evening on this.
I just wanted to caution people against assuming that if a respondent is 55 plus, that they need to necessarily come from Sergeant Woods, because there is a large contingent of people in the town of Newton
do we know
who are over the age of 55 that do not live in Sergeant Woods or one of the age
We do know the
median age of Newton? It's
I don't have it offhand, but it's in the mid
40s.
It's in the mid 40s.
44.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're not one of the older communities, but in general, New Hampshire skews older, so.
What had we projected as a good return on the survey? Last meeting, we set a number that we thought would be.
I think we said a couple hundred, we were shooting.
Oh, if we got 200, I was gonna be really ecstatic. You know, if we get a little over 100, it's okay. I mean, we could extend it further than a week, but we won't get a lot more.
No.
I'll do another blast on social media. The extension notification can go on the town website. It's kind of like our reason for re-noticing it. And I can send around flyers that also say like extended until. It's kind of like a liquidation sale, sort of. Last chance. But this is not the end of the conversation. I do want to make sure that we have some other items for some public engagement to let people come out and provide more feedback. So it's a snapshot in time. You guys are doing pretty well as far as the outreach. You're at least trying to cast the big wide net. People who care are voicing their opinions. People who care and are really, really busy are not. And we're not going to get them a whole lot of other ways.
Right. That was my consensus when I read the people that took it and whatever. It's the people that pay close attention to what's going on.
And honestly, that's the reason for doing some of the social media outreach, is that's where a lot of people are. We don't have a big audience this evening. You guys get probably okay views on your streaming, but more people are on social media.
We got millions out there, Jen. Come on.
I bet there's actually more than a handful watching this evening, so. So if you haven't taken the survey, please take the survey. It's on the town website.
Anything
I'll
else?
ask Cable to continue to run the ad, and I'll ask the Selectman's office to continue to.
And I've been trying to coordinate with people that are attending Old Home Day. Still working on it.
Appreciated. If I can get anybody any materials beyond the sort of extension flyer, please let me know.
Send that to me ASAP so I can print it out on Thursday if I can.
Okay.
Anything else? Okay, adjourned at 8:13.
Very good. Thank
Good
you,
night.
everybody.
Good night, everybody.